So I know TED Talks are not the exact same thing as therapy sessions, but if it's, if it's all right with you, I'd love to just share a personal story about my leadership experience, why I failed to become a great leader, and just let some stuff off my chest, if maybe in the process, if that's okay. So when I was a kid, speaking of therapy, when I was a child, I was obsessed with sports movies, like the Disney variety where everything works out in the end with always a happy ending, right? And the reason why I think I love these sports movies is because at some point we all know they're going to have that moment, right? You know the moment where they're in the championship game. There's only a few seconds left, and they take the lead right before the buzzer goes off, and the crowd goes wild, and people start jumping up and down, and the orchestra kicks in, and people are crying, and families like rushing the floor, and dudes are like grabbing each other by the neck, and sooner or later they play the song, "We are the champions, my friends," and people are erupting with emotion. Somebody hoists up the trophy like, "We did it, yeah!" Like that moment. You guys know what I'm talking about? That moment. As a little kid, like I've always wanted that moment. I wanted to experience the thrill of like that moment. We did it. And for whatever reason, even as a little kid, I've always associated in my mind that "we are the champions" moment with great leadership. I just have always assumed that if you can become a great leader, then people will love you and rally around you, and you can lead them to the championship, and you can win. And because I've always wanted that moment, it kind of sent me on this trajectory of wanting to become a great leader. So it's been a few years since I've been a kid. And so over the years, I've now read countless leadership books. I've listened to countless leadership podcasts. I've spent thousands of dollars traveling all around going to leadership conferences, and even now studied leadership in academia at a university at a doctoral level. And you know what I've found out? It seems to me that a lot of the books and podcasts, everything's just an attempt to answer the same question. There are exceptions, don't get me wrong. But by and large, everybody wants to know what makes a great leader. Because if you can know what makes a great leader, then you can become a great leader. And they all basically answer the question the same way. They take somebody who's a great leader, they dissect them into a whole bunch of parts, their skills and traits and attributes and all of these things, and then they compile all of this into a list. Here's the list of what makes a great leader. You guys are probably familiar. You've read it before. You've heard the list. Here's some things. Leaders have integrity. Have you ever heard that? Leaders are great communicators. Great leaders are charismatic and authentic and genuine, and the list goes on and on. And the implied promise is that if you can do all these things on the list, then you can be a great leader. And people will love you and rally around you, and you can have your "we are the champions" moment, whatever that looks like for you. If you just do the list, you can be that. And I've come to conclude that in the real world, that's not always true, and that it might even be a lie. Actually, not the list. I mean, there's plenty of research to back the list. The list is fine. It doesn't come from nowhere. It's the promise that if you do these things, people will love you, rally around you, and you'll have your moment. I don't think that's true. Let me give you an example. So I used to work for this coffee company. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name. So let's just say between me and you, it rhymes with Schmarbucks. I'm kidding. I can say Starbucks. I had a great time. I loved working there. But I was a shift supervisor, so I was a leader. And I remember when I got my job at Starbucks and I was a shift supervisor, I wanted that "we are the champions" moment, like every shift. I wanted the team to like be together, and we're like serving customers and hitting all our sales goals and just killing it. Like I just wanted to do that. And so I thought if I just do the list, then everybody else is going to be on board, right? No, not at all. Because you know what I discovered? It doesn't matter how effectively you communicate, that a 10-minute break is only supposed to last for 10 minutes. You will still have people that you send on a 10-minute break who do not come back within 10 minutes. It doesn't matter how much integrity you have. It doesn't matter how charismatic you are. You send them on a 10-minute break, you will see them in 20 minutes. They'll be back in 20 minutes. And you know what I realized? Sometimes I have to have a conversation with somebody about that. And it didn't matter how humble I was or how transparent I was or, hey, no judgment, bro. I've been late too. Like, it's cool. Like, trying to be genuine. Like, it doesn't matter how you sugarcoat it and address it, because you still now, for the rest of your shift, might have to work with somebody who's now super defensive because you brought it up, passive aggressive, and who just feels the need to slam things. Just doors, spoons, cups, whatever, just slamming things because you had to remind them how long a 10-minute break is supposed to last. Like, anybody know what I'm talking about? Like leadership in real life. Right. And this is the same true when I try to connect with people. So I'm trying to form relationships that transcend the task at hand. Or, I'm trying to be friends outside of work. That's what I'm saying. Trying to connect and relate and all these things. You know what I've come to realize? It works. I mean, you can connect with the people you lead. There are just some people who just have walls up. Like, it doesn't matter how authentic and transparent and all of these things the list says that you're supposed to be. If they don't want to be your friend, they're just not going to be your friend. If they don't want to connect like you want to connect, it's just not going to happen. Why? Because that's not how relationships work. Relationships are not about one person doing a whole bunch of things, and regardless of what the other person's doing, and then you're going to end up with a healthy, successful relationship. That's not how they work. Relationships involve two people who both have equal influence over the success of that relationship, who have to work together equally. Does that make sense? And it was like a light bulb went off. And I thought to myself, maybe becoming a great leader and connecting with people is not about conquering a list. Maybe it's actually more like a relationship. Leadership is not about one person trying to do a bunch of stuff to get to their we are the champions moment. Leadership is actually about two people working together who have equal influence as to whether or not you ever get to that we are the champions moment. Does that make sense? So I think our fundamental flaw with the list, again, nothing wrong with the list. Our approach to the list is what's flawed, is that I used to think the list was a prescription, that if you do these things, then you can have your moment, right? It's a prescription. But what I realized, the list is not a prescription on how to become a great leader. The list is a description of people who are already great leaders. Does that make sense? You see the difference? It's not prescriptive how you become a great leader to get to your moment. It's descriptive of people who have already had their moment, who have already rallied the team, who are already great leaders. And so when I realized this, it kind of like it went against everything that I had read in all these books and listened to in all of these podcasts. And it kind of left me a little bit disillusioned because, well, what do I do now? Well, if that's not how you become a great leader, well, then how do you become a great leader? If this is not how you connect with people and it doesn't always translate in real life, then how do you connect with people in real life? In this idea of leadership is relationship, in that how, as relationships go, leadership goes. Not one person, a list, two people, a relationship. Well, how do you do it? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's exactly why I'm here today, to explain to you what I think is a more realistic, sustainable approach to leadership that involves both people. So I only have one slide. The tech guys were grateful. Oh, that's not my slides. The other way. There we go. Feel free to take a photo or write it down if you want. But this is the formula, the equation, the philosophy, the approach that is the antithesis to the list. Let me explain. The leader's confidence in their followers needs to be greater than and or equal to the follower's competence. In other words, let me phrase that another way. A leader's confidence, how much responsibility you are willing to confide in the person that you lead, needs to be greater than and or equal to their proven level of competence to handle that responsibility effectively. You see, not what a lot of leadership books that I've read teach. There's a lot of expectation placed on this side of the equation. You have to be vulnerable and honest and and promote people indiscriminately, no matter what they do, no matter what actions, no matter what attitudes they have, no matter what behaviors. You got to roll out the relational red carpet and bend over backwards and give them authority and let them make decisions. And all of this like in a vacuum, taking in no account if they're actually responsible for any of that or can handle any of that. And so a leader's job, I'm contending with you, is maybe not to try to get all of the checks on the checklist, but rather to just try to keep this equation in balance within the relationships that you have with the people that you lead. And so you might be asking, okay, I'm tracking with you. So if it's all about balance, what's with the greater than sign? It's kind of confusing, right? So my confidence in them needs to be equal to the competence, keep that balanced. Well, I hope I'm not overstating my case here, but that little greater than sign, that little squiggle, is everything. It's everything. That is what makes leaders leaders. That's what gives you the ability to develop fulfilling relationships and turn people who you barely know into faithful friends over time. That's the difference between leaders who make other leaders and leaders who don't. That little squiggle, that little line. And so the greater than insinuates that leaders lead, right? If you only give somebody what they've proven they can be competent with, then you're only ever going to get what you've always got, right? So at some level, the leader has to raise the ceiling a little bit and for a period of time, entrust them with greater than they've proven themselves to be competent with, and allow that person's competence to grow into the new role or the relationship or fill in the blank, that you give them more people in their department, you give them a little bit more money, you give them a little bit more authoritative power in the organization, etc., keeping it in balance and allow them to rise to the occasion. You have to give them the freedom to fail. You have to challenge them, but you also have to support them. And what happens is those who are competent will rise to the occasion and fill in that space. And as they continue to grow, you continue to lift the lid, and they continue to grow, and you continue to lift the lid. And over time, you can watch people before your very eyes transform into great leaders and effective people on your team that will rally around you to get to that we are the champions moment. Does that make sense? This also works relationally. Let me ask you a question. If somebody knows a little bit of personal information about you, and they already use that information to gossip about you, and they throw it back in your face, why would you give them more information about you? Why would you let them more into your life? Why would you roll out that relational red carpet, as a lot of books would contend? If they're already like slamming you behind your back based on what little they know, why would you give them more ammunition? That doesn't make any sense. That's not how relationships work. Relationships work like this. I share a personal story with you. You've proven you can be trustworthy with that piece of information about me. You maybe even reciprocate and share a personal story about yourself. And we have these shared experiences together. Maybe we work together, whatever. We learn more about each other. The lid keeps getting lifted. They keep filling in the gap with reciprocating stories, etc. And key phrase, over time, you can develop fulfilling, rewarding friendships out of people that just a few months ago, a few years ago, you barely knew. But if they do not, if they can't handle that responsibility, if they can't handle that relational clout or information, then as a leader, you do not lift the lid any higher until they can. So my contention with you is please avoid the mistake that I had made for so many years, which is viewing this list as a prescription and thinking that if I just do the list, people will love me and they'll want to rally around me and they'll want to go to the championship with me. It doesn't work like that. What instead works is a whole lot of this, a lot of time, a lot of investment, a lot of slow growth, and a lot of balance, knowing that leadership takes two people to get to that moment. So please stop killing yourself trying to do the list and start incorporating this. I love you guys. It's been helpful. Thank you.